Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the service prepared for Sunday the 12th of December 2021, the third Sunday in Advent at Chryston United Free Church. George MacDougall said this: "Christmas means a spirit of love, a time when the love of God and the love of our fellow men should prevail over all hatred and bitterness, a time when our thoughts and our deeds and the spirit of our lives manifest the presence of God." Our first Christmas carol today is "In the Bleak Midwinter." I want to ask you a question. What is important about a Christmas present? I wonder if you've ever been asked that question before, but let me give you some possibilities. Is it the size of the present? You know, bigger the better. Is that what's important? Or is it perhaps that it's the latest must-have thing that everybody's clamoring to get this year? Or perhaps it's the wow, the surprise factor, you know, oh, I didn't see that coming, great. Or is it the cost, you know, the moolah? Is that what's important? Well, before you dismiss that, let me just tell you something. The first Christmas It came with a hefty price tag. Now, I'm not just talking about for Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. I'm not even just talking about for God as well. But also, there was a price to pay for families in Bethlehem. So, when you think about that and the things that went on there, perhaps it is right that at Christmas time, costs are to be factored into this. It's something that we must bear in mind, something that perhaps is important, that Christmas should cost us something. We need to be willing not just to pay the price of the latest gadget or whatever, but we need to be willing to pay the price of giving ourselves to share what Christmas really means, to take a risk, to speak up, to say something. Thing is, are we willing to pay that price? Well, I can't answer that for you. But it's a little bit of homework. I wonder if, as the run-up to Christmas and beyond, we would pay the price of sharing the good news, telling someone about why Christmas is important and what it really, really is all about. Our first scripture reading will now come, and it's taken from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 2.
Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose, it went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
Although it's part of the Christmas account, we very rarely hear sermons or messages about Herod and the atrocity that he perpetrated on the children of Bethlehem. Well, I did say at the start of this Advent series that I might be stirring the pot a wee bit, so get yourself ready for a big spoon churning things up. Herod, at the time of Jesus' birth, according to historical records, was Herod the Great. He was by no means a beloved ruler. He's described by many historians as a man of stern and cruel disposition, brutish and a stranger to all humanity, as one puts it. Herod the Great was a Jew, but although he was the king reigning in Jerusalem, he was not of the line of David, so technically he shouldn't have been on the throne at all. He had the Romans to thank for that. As a harsh ruler, King Herod lived for the moment, and he used his earthly power to keep control. So when he had some foreigners at his gate asking about the new king of the Jews, well, this wily fox was smart enough not to just have them killed for asking such a provocative question. Oh, no. He thought on his feet, and he was crafty enough to let them go and do the dirty work for him. Herod was a ruler who traded on information. You never knew when one seemingly insignificant detail might come in handy. So when the Magi had their meeting with him, he wanted to know exactly when the child was born in exchange for telling them that the new king would be born in Bethlehem. Herod then sat back and let them go and do the searching, and he waited for them to bring back the news of where the child was. Then he could handle it. Herod was a man who maintained and lived on personal power. He really didn't care about spiritual matters. He wanted facts and figures. He wanted insider information. He wanted to preserve his position. He wanted to solidify it, no matter who got hurt or even killed in that process. If holding on to power meant that someone got in his way, well, too bad for them. It really wasn't wise or healthy getting between Herod and any of his goals. Sadly, of course, that's still true today. When prideful people get disturbed or upset, they can make everyone around them very uncomfortable. The more powerful they are, the more suffering they can inflict. And Herod had proven many times that he could do that. This news from the Magi threatened Herod's security. I mean, if word got out that the Messiah had come, well, he would no longer be the top dog. The Jews might attempt to rise up, and Rome would not be happy about that. And Herod knew that Rome must be happy for him to keep his job. History tells us that Herod was a very proud man, and his pride was evident in the works that he set his name to. Well, this rumour of a Messiah would have been a blow to his pride and prestige, as it meant that someone else would be claiming to be the King of the Jews, which was a title that he reserved for himself. Yet, of course, at that moment, there was very little that he could do about it. Herod's perspective was that of a person who had no desire to know this Messiah. All he cared about was his earthly power and his position. You know, I believe that there are people like that still to this day. They seem to have money and power, and they crave more and more of it. But their biggest problem is that they constantly fear losing it all, and consequently, they have no peace. They have no comfort that there's something more than what they can hold in their hands today and now. For Herod, well, this was a very dark Christmas. With all his power and the spies that he had, keeping their ears and eyes open for anything of value, this news just popped up from nowhere. No one gave him the heads up. His network of spies, they had no news. He even had to ask the priests what exactly was going on. Oh yes, for Herod, this was a dark night, and he really didn't know how dark it would become. He expected news from the Magi to come back fairly quickly. But when he realized that his devious plan of using them had been circumvented, well, then Herod showed his true colours. It could have been a surgical strike, a hit squad to take out one individual child. But that plan now lay in tatters. Now the gloves were off. The target was somewhere in Bethlehem. A child 2 years of age, a wee boy, that's what they were looking for, 2 or under. The course of action was obvious to Herod: wipe the lot of them out. But of course, Herod couldn't do that dirty work himself, couldn't mess up his hands doing that. He couldn't wield the sword. So the soldiers were called in, men under his command, men who were used to killing, men who had to obey. We'll now have our second reading from Matthew's Gospel, and after that I think we may have an encounter with someone from 2,000 years ago in that little town of Bethlehem.
Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realised that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more."
Okay, nobody move. Any children, any little boys 2 years of age or under? Any? I'm glad. Trust me, I'm so glad. Herod, he's really outdone himself this time. I'm used to him having really weird orders, but this one, irrational doesn't even begin to cover it. And I just can't follow his orders. I mean, it's one thing to send me out in battle against another armed man. That I can do. But to send me out to butcher a toddler? I just can't do it. I just can't. You know, I wonder what he was thinking. It must have something to do with that visit of the wise men, those magi from the east. I was there in the palace on guard when they arrived. It was the weirdest of things, you know. They came in and they said they were looking for the King of Peace and Justice, the Messiah, the King of the Jews. Of course, Herod says that he's the King of the Jews. He was not too happy. I was surprised he didn't just have them executed on the spot, but yeah, he's a crafty one, that Herod. He welcomed them in and had a chat with them, found out information. Of course, he didn't have anything to trade with it. So he did something that, well, it's unusual for him. He went and spoke to the priests. Now, Herod's not a religious man, but he spoke with them and asked them if they knew anything about this new king, this Messiah. And they told him that the Messiah would be born not in Jerusalem, but in Bethlehem, a couple of miles away. So, of course, he went and spoke with the Magi about this and swapped information. He told them where the baby would be born and got information from them as to when the baby would be born. You know, he's smart enough to know what to do, and he sent them on their way to bring back news. You know, that whole thing had me thinking. 2 years of age, a little boy. You know, a couple of years ago there was that census by Caesar where everybody had to go to their hometown. Bethlehem apparently was absolutely filled to bursting. The taverns and the inns were doing a roaring trade. But one of my cohort, he was telling me that, well, he's billeted down there, and he said that at one point there was a family arrived, well, a couple, But the woman was expecting, I mean, she was heavily pregnant. But they hadn't booked ahead. They'd nowhere to stay. They ended up in a barn, in a stable. And the baby was born there, apparently. And they'd nowhere to lay him, no cradle. So they put this baby in the feeding trough, in the manger. Now that's a bit strange, but what followed, apparently, was even stranger. Apparently, shepherds came into Bethlehem and they went straight to this child, this newborn, found him there. They told the couple that they'd been told by angels about this birth and that this child was born to be the Messiah, the Prince of Peace, the King of joy. Now, I'm Jewish. I know of these things. But that's strange. That really is. Could it be connected? Is this time the time? Well, that same soldier, he told me that, after the Magi left Herod's palace, they went to Bethlehem and they apparently followed a star. There's lots of stars up in heaven. I never noticed anything different. But apparently they did. And they ended up at a house. No longer a stable. And apparently they found a family. And a little boy. His mum and dad. And they gave this child gifts. Oh, not just any old gifts. Really expensive gifts. Some of it was gold. I could have used some of that gold. But it got me thinking. There must be a connection in all of this. And then what's even weirder is no sooner had these wise men brought their gifts than apparently this family upped and left. They took the child and were gone. And then the Magi, they didn't go back to Herod. Even though they were supposed to, they left by a different route. Herod was incandescent with rage when he found out that they had slipped away. And he went absolutely nuts. And that's when he gave this order that I just can't follow, to go and slaughter these innocent baby boys, 2 years and under. I hope that child that got away, I hope that's the one that Herod was looking for. I hope that was the Messiah. I hope he turns out to be the Prince of Peace and the King of Hope. Oh, hope. Now, wouldn't that be a thing? Hope that God will make a difference. A hope that God has sent his Messiah. A hope for peace. So I would no longer need this. Hope for a new start. A reign of peace. Now, wouldn't that be something? I better go. The others will have carried out their dirty work. But I hope this coming King, this Messiah, I hope that he has been born, and I hope that he's safe. Maybe one day people will sing songs of this. They'll remember this story. Maybe I'll be in it. Wouldn't that be something? Maybe that birth is important. Maybe that child is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the Messiah, the Noel. Yes, the first Noel. Born is the King of Israel. Imagine if someone wrote a song of that. I would sing that song. Noel, Noel, born is the King of Israel. Yes, I would sing of that King. And you will sing of Noel. Noel, born as the King of Israel. You will sing of it. Ave.
The first Noel, the angels did was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. They looked up and saw a star shining in the east beyond them far, and to the earth it gave great light, and so it continued both day and night. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. And by the light of that same star, 3 wise men came from country far. To seek for a king was their intent, and to follow the star wherever it went. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. His star drew nigh to the northwest, o'er Bethlehem it took its rest, and there it did both stop and stay, right over the place where Jesus lay. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Then entered in those wise men 3, fell reverently upon their knee, and offered there in his presence their gold and myrrh and frankincense. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Then let us all with one accord sing praises to our heavenly Lord, that hath made heaven and earth of nought, and with his blood mankind hath bought. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel.
Let us close with a benediction. By the tender mercy of God, may his presence be made known to you. May this light be given where once there was darkness, and hope where there was none. Go into this Christmas season trusting God to guide your feet into the ways of peace. And may the love of God Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be with you and all whom you love, this day and always. Amen.